You are listening to the I Choose My Best Life podcast with Dr. Saundra Dalton-Smith, a show that is dedicated to helping you live fully, love boldly, and rest intentionally. For additional resources, visit ichoosemybestlife.com.
Have you ever wondered what it feels like to be truly seen and deeply loved, to be able to step into the fullness of your identity, the parts of you that you know and the parts of you you have yet to experience? In my new book, Being Fully Known, The Joyful Satisfaction of Beholding, Becoming, and Belonging, we dive deep into these topics. It's an invitation to experience just that, the joy of finding out who God says you are that maybe you haven't recognized yet. Maybe He felt the Holy Spirit speaking to some part of your heart about something and you're thinking, I couldn't possibly do that. Well, in this book, we are going to dive deep into your I could nevers. We're going to take a look at the parts of your identity that maybe have been shut down because of fear, maybe have been shut down because of things other people said, and maybe because of things you said to yourself. It's a journey into the kind of love that changes everything, the kind of love that only can be experienced when you behold God in the fullness of who He is and allows what you behold to become a part of who you are becoming. You can find a copy wherever books are sold, including Amazon, Books A Million, Barnes & Noble, as well as Target and some other retailers. When you purchase early, you get a lot of great pre-order gifts. So be sure to get your copy now. Welcome, everyone. This is Dr. Saundra, and you're listening to I Choose My Best Life. Today, we're going to talk about grit. What does that mean, and how do you walk into it in a way that you can navigate life's wildernesses from a place of really knowing who God is and how He is moving in and through you? And I have with me today leadership and growth coach Mitch London. And I have to say this, I met Mitch in a program where he was basically doing exactly that on a regular weekly basis. And at the time that I met him, I didn't really know what a leadership or growth coach kind of does. He does it in such a way that it brings in just the wisdom of God, just this level of spiritual intelligence that was transformational. It was just really powerful. And I'm excited to say that he has a new book that released earlier last year or late last year around September, titled Gravel, Grit, and Glory, Navigating Life's Wilderness. And so I want to take a moment just to kind of dive into some of that because it's just such a rich teaching about this process. And so, Mitch, thank you so much for joining me. Let me start by just asking a little bit about your background. How did you get started in the type of coaching that you do?
Oh, thank you. It's so, you're one of my favorite people. So I'm so happy to be here with you, Dr. Saundra, and just to have these conversations. I believe these conversations always reveal powerful things that normally wouldn't have come out otherwise. And so it's going to be fun to see what we discover and uncover in this process. The book and kind of how I got into this. So as I looked back, and one of the things, I know you know this, but when you undertake a project of writing a book, it does so much more to you than I think it does to anybody else. And so as you're writing this, it's kind of, the Lord is just filleting you open. He's like, oh, remember this thing that you thought you were healed from? Yeah, we're going to revisit it now. And remember this thing that you thought you were moving past? Well, you weren't, and we're going to go back and we're going to deal with it. And so writing this book, it allowed me a lot of time for reflection, a lot of time for healing, for kind of growth and stretching of myself. And I kind of go back and you start to look at patterns of your life. And I started noticing over and over again these patterns of how I interacted with people, what people came to me for, they kind of uncovering some of those subconscious default identity pieces that we have of ourselves that have been there, middle school age. I was a guy everybody came to with relationship problems. High school, I was still the same person that people were seeking advice. They seeking the different things. And so you start to see that. And then when you sit down to write a book and start to put your words and your thoughts and you pour out your passion onto paper, it just does something so profound. And so to answer your question, I got into this. It's kind of always been a part of who I was, but I'm allowing the Lord now to kind of define it for me and show me, this is who you've been. These are the fingerprints you've left your entire journey so far. And now you can do it more intentionally when you're aware of it.
I love this conversation because I feel like this is what's so hard for so many of us is that there might be these, as you mentioned, it's like these moments in our journey where we stepped really into the fullness of our identity, but we didn't abide there. We stepped in, it's like we dipped our toe in the water and it's like, oh, I was really good at that, or I got an award for that, or people came to me for that. And then it's like we retract it and then we go do these other lives, these other things that make us money or whatever it is. Why is there a disconnect with that? Why do we tend to struggle so with aligning with kind of who God created us to be?
I think a lot of it is the voices. I mean, obviously it's going to be passions, it's going to be growth. We have certain things we want to do in life, but then you're also kind of guided and told. I was just on a podcast recently and the story came up of my parents told me, hey, Mitch, you're not college material. You've got your head in the clouds. You're a dreamer. You're a visionary. You're not somebody who's going to sit down and actually do the work. And I believed them. And so when you have these little moments where somebody speaks something over your life, and I didn't take my SATs, I didn't take the ACTs in high school. I was like, what's the point? Why do I need to sit here and study for something? Obviously, that's not for me. I'll figure something else to do. No, it's no fault. I mean, it was something that my parents spoke over me, and they were just observing behaviors that I had as a teenage, wild young man in Albuquerque, New Mexico. And so they bespoke those things. But for whatever reason, that seed stuck. That seed got planted in my heart and it became a belief that I had. And so I had talents, I had these different things, but I didn't pursue them because it didn't align with now what I believed. It's like, well, I can't pursue that. That's interesting. I feel this pull to go that direction, but it doesn't seem to align with what I know to be true, quote unquote true. And so then you move away from it, trying to seek that true thing. And I think, in my book, I talk about kind of three main principles. They're undertones of everything, but resilience, adaptability, and spiritual alignment. And we can get adaptable and we can become aimless, or we're constantly trying to pivot. We're constantly trying to maneuver, but we don't ever have an end goal. And so I believe, and I teach this a lot, that you have to understand identity. Then you have to understand vision, and you have to understand how those connect. When you don't have those two connected, you can be a very strong person with no direction. I know who I am, but I don't know where I'm going. Or I can have a vision, I can have a direction, but I am not the person to get there. I can't actually step into that fully because I'm not who I need to be to become the person that is in this vision. So when you can align the identity and vision together, then you can start moving down there. And so in my case, it just was a breakthrough, a disconnect because of what I believed, what I allowed people to speak over to me, what I chose to believe into my heart, and then start to make actions and decisions based on that belief. And I think that's where a lot of people struggle is we hear certain things and we just assume it's true. How often do we sit and, stop? At that time, my spiritual maturity wasn't at a level where I could say, Lord, my parents said I'm not college material. What do you say? That would have been the nice way to get out of that situation, but that I wasn't in that kind of mindset, that frame of mind.
Well, I want to dive deeper into those two topics, identity and vision, because I feel like when we hear words like identity, I think it's sometimes to know if you have come to a place of really understanding who you are and who God created you to be. What are some steps or some first places people can begin if they're unsure if they really have allowed the fullness of their identity to be revealed to them?
Yeah, there's some fun exercises that people can do. And one of the ones you start down is you start to, what am I, like I mentioned very early on as our conversation, there were certain things that I was good at all my life. There were certain natural giftings, natural talents that I had. And when you can sit down and, start writing those out, what do people come to me for? What are the solutions that people, they knock on my door, they call me late at night, they get those text messages. Where are people seeking your help or your wisdom or your guidance? There's going to be some natural giftings in this area, in that place. And then you can look at other areas of what spiritual giftings do you believe that you have? What, have you sat down with the Lord and have him? That was one of the hardest questions I think I've ever asked is, tell me how you see me, Lord. And I resisted for a long time even asking that question. I wasn't sure if I was ready to hear the answer, what it meant, if I now knew what that answer was, what was going to, draw upon me, or what obligation that I then had to step into these things. I had a lot of weird mindsets around that too. But just sitting down, what are my natural giftings? What are my spiritual giftings? And you can start to look at overlaps. Take that and look at life experiences. Now that I have a kind of a grid of the things I'm naturally gifted at, and I know spiritually I'm growing in these areas, where has this shown up in my life? Where can I pinpoint and say, this was a moment where these two things came together and I was walking it? How did you feel in that moment? Did you feel empowered? I'm guessing when you identify these, you're going to feel like I was really charged. Like I felt like I was on top of the world. I wasn't pouring out, I was overflowing. And this was a great place to be. And so when you're seeking these kind of identity moments, I would go back and just start simple. What are the things that people come to me for? Where do I feel like I'm naturally gifted? How does that align with spiritual giftings? Or what the Lord has spoken over me, what he said, who I am and what I am here to do. And then pinpoint those moments and you'll start to kind of stoke the fire a little bit in your own soul. And you'll watch it. It's like, yeah, I remember that. And man, was that flame burning hot in that moment.
That's so good. That makes me think about when I was fighting with this with God. I didn't want to hear what he said he saw because it didn't align with what I thought I was supposed to be doing. And so I remember sitting down one day doing that exercise and I was like thinking back to all the different times that it's like, when was I celebrated without effort is what I called it. It's like I wasn't even trying to have attention or be celebrated. It was just like the Spirit of God on me in that moment attracted the attention of man. And it was like, when were those moments? And it was just really strange because every one of those were moments where I was up speaking to a group. And I was like, but God, I hate speaking in front of people. It's like, I don't want to do that. And I remember one time when I was asked to give this talk, something related to like something with school. And we were at this like event. And so somebody in the group had to stand up and say something, and how my name popped up, who knows? But I remember standing up and giving this talk. And I remember just in the moment, it was like something clicked. It's like, I wasn't me anymore. And I thought back to, and when it happened, it was so otherworldly that I was like, I can't even process. I don't even know what that was, but I'm just going to forget about it and move on with my life. But when I was sitting there processing that and a thought came up, what came to mind was when it talked about people with certain giftings and the Spirit came upon them for the gift. And I thought, oh, I get it now. I can now see where these moments occurred. So even with knowing that, though, I had no vision because I was fighting against what I thought the identity was, because I didn't even want to claim the identity that I saw. So one of the things you talk about is this kind of reunion of the two, the union between the kind of convergence moment between the identity and the vision. So before we get to the conversion moment, how do we get God's vision for even who we are if we can't, or can you get the vision without having the identity first?
No, I think that's the way the Lord talks to us. I mean, we see it all throughout his word in the Bible of he's constantly casting vision. He's constantly drawing to that. And there's an imagery that I love to do when I talk about vision with people. And I as a kind of a father figure and a child, as a dad, I have 4 kids. If I want to point and to direct their gaze a certain direction, sometimes I kneel down, I get on their level, and you kind of face to face, cheek to cheek, and you reach out and you point your finger. This is where I want you to look. And I think we have these moments with our Lord where he comes down as our Father and says, okay, I want you to look right here. I don't want all the distractions. I don't want you to look at everything else. And you'll have these moments where it's almost like cheek to cheek. You can feel his cheek pressed against yours, his finger outstretched, pointing it in front of you, saying, this is where I want you to see. And you'll catch these moments. You'll see them because they feel different. They register different. It's not just an awareness or optically my receptors are identifying something, but your soul again is like, aha, this is a piece that I needed. This is something that is connected to a deeper purpose. So I think most people don't have trouble seeing vision. They might have trouble justifying, like you did with speaking, where we have a story attached to something else. And so that's where the Lord starts to bring us into a process of, okay, we need to address the story that you have of public speaking, for an example. You believe it to be a certain thing. I'm calling it something different. And let's work on a reframe and how to redefine this in your heart so you can move forward with it. I never wanted to be in ministry. I remember for a long time, like, no, thank you. It was not something that I was interested in whatsoever. And God, he kind of got a hold of me one day and it's like, no, I'm calling you in, and this is what you're going to be doing. And once I felt that cheek to cheek moment and I saw what he was seeing and not what I thought it was supposed to look like, then it made sense. Then I could accept it. I wasn't resistant to the vision. So I don't think people have a hard time getting vision. I think they have a hard time being resistant to the vision of how they defined it.
Oh, that is so much wisdom right there. That is exactly it. That is exactly it. Because you're right. I think I had lots of those and that imagery is just beautiful. Those cheek to cheek moments.
Hmm.
Whereas like I saw the vision, but I couldn't accept the person I saw in the vision because it's like that's not me. And I think that's part of the battle, the wilderness that you talk about with your book is that even if I catch the vision, if I can't believe who I'm seeing in the vision I can actually be, how do I how do I jump that hurdle?
Yeah, so that's in my book. That's kind of a progression style book, and so I outline an adventure. So I'm a wilderness guy. Those that don't know me, I have a ministry called Just Ed Wilderness. I take men out into the wilderness here in Colorado. We do some cabin events, group camping, but some of them are backpacking, where you're just leaving civilization, you're leaving cell phone signal. Everything that you're taking is just what you have on your back. And there's a process that we all go through, and it's intentionally designed that way because there's some kind of layers that need to be shed on the trail. And so part of this is in my book is just outlining the struggles that we go of starting an adventure, starting a trip, and then the challenges that we face along the way. Part of that is knowing a direction. Part of that is seeking of where am I going? I don't just randomly one day say I'm going to head out to the woods and see where I end up. Like there's always going to be some place that a destination in mind, a goal in mind of where you're going, or you end up lost. And so there's an internal battle again of reconnecting a little bit of who God says that you are, who you know that what you're called to be, those different types of gifts to get you to the trailhead. I'm at least in the right place to start this journey. I may not know what I'm going to uncover along the way, but I'm at least going to start from the right place. And I'm going to allow the Lord to be that guide in my story, in my journey, and walk me through this process.
Well, I love that about you that you do these excursions because one of the things that you state is that you encourage people to embrace the wild and grow closer to God through the adventures. And I feel like for so many of us, we kind of have strayed away from adventure. We like security more than we like adventure. And
Hmm.
the wild sounds scary. So it's like, "Oh, let me kind of draw back a little bit." But I feel like that's really when we get closer to God is when we don't feel as if we have as much control or as much of the security and safety of the things that we have kind of attached all of that to. How did you begin this process of really seeing the wilderness in a new way?
For me, it was a place where I always went to go get peace. And so it's just naturally, I just felt like I am more at home in the wilderness than I am in any kind of man made city type of situation. It was just a place that the untamed wildness of it was comforting. And it's hard to kind of explain, I guess, if it doesn't speak to you in that way. But it's just a place where I felt most connected to God. So I do a lot of prayers. I like to do regional intercession, and I hop in my car and drive all over. I live in Colorado. I drive all over the state of Colorado. I just recently finished where I prayed at each of the four corners of the state. We're just releasing blessings over the state of Colorado. And during these times, then he often takes me into the wilderness areas, the lesser known highways than the metropolitan area. So I don't spend a lot of time driving through major cities. It's always going down these different areas. But there's just something about it that allows me to connect, kind of frees my mind a little bit to kind of get closer with God. And then as he called me into this men's ministry side, he started talking to me more about wilderness. And I've always heard wilderness was taught as a season of struggle. Like if you're going into a wilderness season, you're in lack, you're in, all these different things that we hear on Sundays. I was like, Lord, that just doesn't make sense to me because I feel more nourished when I'm in the wilderness than when I'm not. So can you kind of walk me through this? And I love to study the Hebrew and the original Greek words. And Hebrew, the wilderness word is midbar, and it's a place of speaking. And then you start to see themes in the Bible where the Lord, before major transition seasons, and most of our favorite Bible characters, he put them in the wilderness to receive instructions. I need you to hear from me. I need my voice to be the only voice that you're listening to. And sometimes that's hard to do in the noise of city, the noise of daily life, the noise of the household situation. Now, I'm not saying that you have to drive out into the woods somewhere to hear from the Lord. It's just my preferred place. But it's a place where he draws us away from what is currently occupying our attention into a place where we can hear him more clearly. And so as I started diving in and learning more and more about the wilderness and how transformational it was for so many of our favorite people in the Bible, it exploded within me. Like people need wilderness time. They need time It's something Jesus did frequently, that he would often retreat to the wilderness to go hear from the Father. It wasn't a once in a while. It was an intentional act to go get close, to get directions, to make sure I'm recharged, ready to go for whatever's coming up next. And that's why I use wilderness. And as he's grown and shown it to me more and more, there's so many profound things to be learned out there.
Yes, I love that. I love just the intentionality of kind of the journey that you take these gentlemen on. You're taking them in the actual wilderness, but you're leading them through just the spiritual process, as you mentioned, where I feel like grounds the situation even more in that they're actually walking it as they are kind of mentally and spiritually walking through it. As I mentioned earlier, I met Mitch through a situation where he was functioning more as really as a coach for me. And the type of coaching he does is more as a relational coach, a lot of spiritual intelligence and really helping me to be able to start seeing things through God's eyes and not so kind of logically, as I have a tendency to like push the spiritual intelligence aside and like, let me get you to just the logic of what my brain kind of can make sense of it. And I love that aspect of what you do, because I feel like so many times I would get kind of blocked in by the logic and kind of push aside the spiritual intelligence because I couldn't make it make sense to me. Share a little bit about just the type of work that you do, just the leadership and growth through spiritual intelligence, because I don't feel like that's something many of us have ever heard of a coach that teaches that way, and how to even apply it within our work or our lives.
Yeah. So most of the time within leadership, EQ, emotional intelligence, is very popular right now in the world. It's just realizing how to deal with and how to recognize emotional patterns, how to create safe places for people to process emotions. But it generally stops right there. There's an acceptance of an emotion. Yeah, there's an emotion present. We don't really know what to do with it, but how can we make sure that we're not derailing the situation because we don't, the emotion is undefined or something like that. Generally what happens, and kind of the framework that I walk people through, is there's usually a stimulus. There's something that causes an emotion to come up. And then people can either run through the emotional and goes directly into logic, the IQ, like what you talked about, and we just get into problem solving mode. Sometimes people back up a step and say, why is this causing this reaction within me? Why did the stimulus cause an action to get into problem solving mode? And we need to kind of dive deeper into the emotion of it. I'm saying take it a step further back. When that stimulus happens, step back into the spiritual intelligence place and let's start looking at roots. Why is these emotions even there in the first place? What is causing this emotion? What is it that is a belief, a subconscious construct in our mind that is making us act and believe and behave in certain ways? And when you can go back that way, especially as a leader in an organization, if you have teams that you're leading, being able to recognize that in others, being able to recognize that in yourself. I have somebody who's underperforming. Well, what's my first emotional reaction? My stimulus is they're underperforming. The next cause is, what do I want to do about it? Do I go into logic or IQ and I'm just, hey, I just want to fix this problem. Here's some tips, here's some tricks, here's some frameworks of how you can fix this problem. Or am I understanding, hey, there's maybe something going on inside this person emotionally, and I'm guessing they probably don't understand it yet. If I can back up one step further and spiritually, there's probably some other deeper beliefs going on that is even causing these emotions to come to the surface in the first place. And so my goal is to help equip leaders to build through relational leadership, cultures and houses of honor within the workplace and in the marketplace, how to lead yourself better, how to lead your teams better, how to lead your family better by taking a step back, removing yourself from the situation and saying, okay, stimulus as they happen to us all day long. There's always something that's coming up in front of our face, demanding our attention right now. It's urgent, right? Urgent often gets in the way of the important. If you can take a step back and say, okay, why is this presenting? Let's go back spiritually. What do I know? What does God say? What am I discerning here? And you can start to use different tools and draw on different, modalities or whatever you want to call them. But you can position those that you're leading in a different way, in a different light by using, I call it SQ. So having the SQ edge, the spiritual intelligence edge.
I think for myself, when I think of spiritual intelligence, I don't know if I primarily kind of go into that route. When I'm kind of processing, I find that for myself, is either going toward logic or, like you mentioned, going towards like the emotional processing of it. So I love this kind of extra layer of personal development, of really understanding who you are as a leader and why you do what you do, why and how you show up in the world in the way that you do. And then this deeper training that you are now taking people through as it relates to their identity and really bridging that identity with the vision that God has for them. I truly believe that for a lot of people, there's this kind of sweet spot where we have come to terms with our identity. We're not fighting it like Jonah anymore. We're not running
Right.
from who God says we are. We've come to terms with that. We may not have fully stepped into the vision, but we have some vision of what he is showing us as where we're going. And there's this moment where my friend Jen Han often says, where we put our yes on the table. It's like, I'm not there, but I believe who you say I am, and I believe I can get there with you, God. That particular moment, I feel like, is a place of just great heart and spiritual battle that happens. And I feel like a lot of people kind of stay shy of that moment, because putting that yes on the table has a lot of just warfare sometimes that seems to come around it. How can someone, when they get to that place where it's like they're starting to build, you're walking them through this journey, they're starting to really come to terms with their identity, they see the vision, and it's the first steps. Maybe it's to start the business or write the book or whatever the first step has to be, where their yes is finally on the table. How do you keep someone motivated so that when that all the stuff comes, it doesn't take them out?
That's a good one. Part of within the SQ Edge and the kind of the spiritual intelligence framework, I have a thing called the DARE protocol. And it's just discern, align, respond, and execute. And so your first thing is to discern what's happening. What is actually going on? I need spiritual clarity for this moment. And what you're talking about is when that yes is on the table, is when you're moving into that alignment. Like, okay, I'm going to go ahead and trust you, Lord. But the next portion of having a respond versus a reaction is very different and very key. If we respond, it's more of an intentional process, and it's going to involve trust. It's going to involve faith. If I'm reacting, then I'm going back and I'm allowing the stimulus of whatever the situation is to create a narrative in my mind, which is then going to help me create confusion, a lack of clarity, that anxiety that we all feel, those things. But if you can back up and say, okay, I need to discern first what you're calling me to do, Lord. Show me again how you're seeing this. Let's have our cheek to cheek moment. If I need a reminder, can you clarify your vision for me? Can I slow down and discern? That's always my first suggestion. If you're feeling confusion, if you're feeling kind of that anxiousness, it's usually because there's a lack of clarity. There's more assumptions than there is actual, like, okay, I feel like this is the next step. And even if it is just the one next step, that's still clarity. You may be asking the Lord for 15 next steps, and maybe that's where the anxiousness is coming from. But he says, just take the first next step. So let's go back, Lord. Give me my cheek to cheek moment. Let's discern what's actually happening. Now, if I need to align myself, so this is, how can I align my emotions? How can I align my mindset, my perspectives, so then I can then move and respond intentionally? And it's to really, again, slow it down for a moment and say, okay, who have you called me to be? What are the giftings that I have? How does this in there? Or are you growing something new in me? I'm not as scared of growth if I know it's coming. I just don't like to be ambushed with growth. When I'm ambushed into a situation, then it feels very uncomfortable. But if I can say, Lord, I feel you stretching me in this area, I can learn to trust you in it. I can align my emotions. I can be more saying, this isn't something that's blindsiding me. I can feel I'm being called to stretch and build some spiritual muscles in this. Then when you can go in with responding, you're going in with like emotional wisdom. Like you can now take more thoughts captive. You can kind of get those different things, those frameworks that's going to be revealed within you of saying, this is dangerous. This is scary. How do you know you can trust? Remember the last time that it failed when you stepped out and you tried to believe the Lord and it crashed and burned. All of the evidence, quote unquote, evidence that tries to come back to you is when you got to say, okay, no, this is just trying to keep me safe. And these thoughts are trying to keep me from moving into a place of vulnerability. And I just have to be able to bring those in under subjection and bring those in submission to this discernment, this alignment, my cheek to cheek moment, the reminders that the Lord gives us. One of the things I love about God is that he will stretch us, he will grow us, but he's always there with us. And we just forget to ask him, Like, can you just show me again? Can you help remind me? Can you encourage me in this? And I love how many times in the Bible he talks about how he's going to equip us to have the abilities, to have the talents, to do the things that pleases him, as it says in Philippians. Like, he's given us the stuff to do, the abilities, the gifts to do the things that please him. So we don't have to feel like we're going unprepared. We just have to allow him to do it. But then finally, in that DARE protocol is execute. When I can implement, it feels more practical. It feels more logical because now I've addressed my mindset. I've addressed my emotions. I kind of have more validation of my spiritual identity, about the direction, the vision that he's given me. So I'm not moving into a place of kind of unknown chaos or unknown anxiousness. I can settle my body down and move more confidently into these situations.
Oh, I love this. I'm chatting with Mitch London, the author of the book, Gravel, Grit, and Glory, Navigating Life's Wilderness. And so, Mitch, I love what you just shared there because I feel like I feel like you just described the reason why I always loved having conversations with you, because I would always feel like I was coming to these meetings that we'd have together feeling like, why am I being so stretched? I'm so tired. God, can't you just give me like all 15 steps? It's like, I'm really good at following a plan. Just give me all the 15 steps and just, let me go. And that's exactly what he doesn't want to do, is to turn me loose, with the steps, but to be on the journey with me with the steps. It's a process. It's a relationship building aspect of the journey. And I love that you bring that into your training and your coaching. How could someone who wants to go deeper with you? I know you do. Share what you do with men. I know you have like some upcoming retreats and different things that you do, but hopefully you still work with women as well.
Yes.
I didn't ask you before this. Hopefully you still do, as far as some of the leadership type coaching things that you offer as well.
Yeah. So right now I'm in the middle of, this week will be session 5, and anybody can still join. So one of the things I'm doing right now, it's called a Discipleship Mastermind. It's a little bit of a hybrid. It's not just a straight discipleship course, and it's implementing biblical principles and leadership principles that you would get normally in a mastermind as well. And so it's called the Wilderness Collective. And I'll get you some links for that. It's gravelgritandglory.com/mastermind. And it's a free mastermind. It's something that I'm doing on a weekly basis where we're going through different processes and learning these different types of tools and things. And that's both for men and women. The men's side, it's called Just Ed Wilderness, and it's the same thing for the website, justedwilderness.com. But that one is more men's discipleship and wilderness experiences. And so when we go into the wilderness, we're really going to challenge our internal architecture, that internal framework of what we believed, how we believed it. And really, my goal is every man returns home a different man. They come off of the mountain as Moses did. He went up into the mountain and he came down a different man. And so I want to come home and I want people to say your face is shining and you are so brilliant now. You're carrying the presence of the Lord in a new way, probably just because your understanding has changed. Not necessarily that some dramatic impartation moment, we laying hands on you, you're slain in the spirit, whatever it is. It's just your understanding now is no longer dimming what the Lord is doing in your life. You can allow him to shine through you more brightly. And so I do it with that. And then coaching side, I do a lot of just professional coaching with people who are growing organizations who are looking for leadership type of stuff. And so I've got those 3 different types of ways that I'm actively in right now.
Excellent. And we will link to Mitch's book on Amazon and all the different places so you're able to download that, as well as to his website and to his mastermind. I think that would be a great place for all of you to begin to engage with his content and just really to glean from the level of spiritual knowledge and wisdom that he brings to so many of these topics. As I endorsed this book, and as I mentioned there, I always leave these conversations with Mitch with just a kind of a deeper understanding of how God is moving in my life. And there's always just these revelatory moments that pop up. So just love the relationship that you have with the Lord and how you're able to really share that with other people.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I enjoy these conversations, Dr. Saundra. I mentioned that you've been one of my favorite people, and I think I've told you this before, but your yes is all, as far as I've seen, and maybe unless you've hidden it, has always been before the Lord. It's always been there, no matter the stretching, no matter the kind of seasons where it's like, okay, Lord, you're really growing it. And I still truly do believe, I remember I sent you a message a while back that the Lord has distinguished you in this season. and that he's really taken you and said, okay, I'm elevating you from this place of where you've been serving so faithfully. And this distinguishing is coming place where other people are going to recognize it immediately. And so I love when you're posting, and I love seeing how the book, the articles, everything is just expanding like a wildfire across the globe.
Oh, I appreciate you so much. Thank you for that. And like I said, if you are someone who are in this part of your journey, like I have been for, it seems like a couple of years, where it's like, I was literally right where Mitch was talking about. It's like, God, I see the vision, but I'm not sure I'm who you think supposed to be in that vision. And having that difficulty aligning your identity with the vision of what God has shared with you. This is the type of wilderness that we're talking about. We're not talking about, oh, you got to go through some like hard thing. That is a hard wilderness to walk through the reality of your identity from who you believe you are based on what other people have said and what you say about yourself and who God really says that you are. So I pray that you will join us in this wilderness journey and to jump over into his mastermind to learn more. Thank you so much, Mitch, for being on the show.
Thank you so much for having me. Such a blessing.
Until next time, everyone, live fully, love boldly, and rest intentionally.